have gathered here to discuss a very pertinent issue pertaining to climate change. How the climate change is going to affect the coastal belt of Sindh is the question we are going to discuss today. For that, we have experts from Islamabad as well as University of Sindh. Let me also mention here that this webinar is organized in collaboration with University of Sindh. So before I introduce our distinguished speakers, I would like to invite President IRS, Ambassador Nadeem Riaz, for welcome remarks. So over to you, sir.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and good morning to everyone. It's such a pleasure that we could organize a webinar on climate change in collaboration with our partners at Jamshoro. We have a collaborative relationship with them. And my special thanks to Dr. Kumar, my special thanks to AISHA Khan and Dr. MUKHTIAR again for joining us. Climate change is something which is of immense importance to the entire world, affecting the world as well as to one of the most susceptible countries to the effects of climate change. And I really look forward to listening to the experts on climate change, the issues in general, and how it is going to affect the coastal areas, because I think it is something which our policymakers must look into to ensure that if the harmful effects are minimalized. This is the start of a good collaboration and the University of Sindh at Jamshoro, and I hope increase with the passage of time. Thank you very much this morning. Mariam, it's over to you now.
Thank you, sir. So our first speaker is Ms. AISHA Khan. Let me introduce her. Ms. AISHA Khan has over 20 years experience in development work. As founder and head of the Civil Society Coalition for Climate Change and Mountain and Glacier Protection Organization, she works at the community and policy level to strengthen climate action by supporting inclusive and participatory practices. She is a member on the board of directors of several organizations and provides expert advice on climate change, related adaptation and mitigation challenges. She is currently serving as the convener of the Working Group on Climate Security at the Strategic Policy Planning Cell, National Security Division. She is also part of the External Advisory Council of the World Bank on developing the South Asia Region Climate Change Action Plan. She contributes articles to newspapers and magazines and takes part in national and international discourse on climate change. In 2019, she was awarded the Bright Award for Environmental Sustainability at Stanford University. So with this brief introduction, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the Institute of Regional Studies and especially Ambassador Nadeem Riaz for inviting me to be part of this very important conversation. So I'll start out by saying that when we talk about resilience, it's very important that first we define, hang on, my IT guy is doing something. वापस ले जाए, मैं भी बोल रही थी. I'm sorry, he interrupted me with the slide presentation. I wasn't quite yet done with my introductory remarks. So I just wanted to say that, when we talk about building resilience, we first need to define the vulnerability, and then we need to identify the causes of that vulnerability, and then move towards the pathways of adaptation, mitigation that are necessary in our context for building that resilience. So since this is related to climate change, let me go back very quickly. I know we have a very learned audience who are already aware, but just as a refresher, that the main cause why we're thinking about building coastal resilience, or why we think our coastal areas are becoming vulnerable, is due to climate change. And climate change is affecting these areas at two different levels. One is through the hydrological changes that are happening as a result of global warming. And the second is also due to the changes in the atmospheric pressures that are causing more frequent and more intense hurricanes, cyclones, storm surges. So that is the context in which I'm going to discuss and share my input about how to build resilience, what is at risk, how do we move forward in developing adaptation mitigation that meets the needs of nature, as well as safeguards the interests and lives and livelihoods of the communities. Now, it's very difficult for anybody, I think, to have a certain definitive plan on which representative carbon pathway the world will follow, because we really don't know. If the sea level rises to 2 meters, all coastal areas will get submerged, and there will be no risk reduction plan that will work. However, if we look at the least carbon pathways, and we make some strategic plans on how do we protect in the coastal areas, the different interests we have. So we have to look at the socio-economic and environmental cost of the damage that the coastal area will receive as a result of this, and what is it that we in Pakistan at best are positioned to do to make a difference in the lives of those vulnerable communities. So contextualizing now, my talk on the basis of these three elements of defining the vulnerability and then moving forward towards pathways to resilience, I will share a few thoughts with you. The first one is, why does coastal resilience matter? Because when we're going to see storm surges, when we're going to have hurricanes, we are going to have we will need the ability to bounce back. And that ability will be very closely connected to how we make our strategic plans. The coastal areas are also very important because they are a marine belt, and they also have ocean and sea routes for trade. So the port cities have a different significance in the economy of every country, and we are on a vital trade route. So we need to think both for protecting our industrial development, our economic input that comes through trading activities, as well as the impact of these storm surges on the lives and livelihoods of both the rural and the urban communities, because both will be affected in different matters, in manner, but the effect will be negative. So when we look at it from the lens of human security, we see that there is a very long coastline and there is a lot of habitation in that area. Sindh province occupies majority of the coastline and Balochistan a lower part, but nevertheless, the impact will be on both of them because 10% of the population lives near or in the vicinity of the coastal zone, and about 20% of it is relatively developed. But the more important thing that we need to remember here is that 40% of our industry is in the coastal area, and at present, the sea level rise is 1.1 millimeter per year. The effect of climate change is going to be devastating because it's going to affect every sector, whether it's agriculture, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's livelihoods, whether it is the service sector. So we have to take a holistic view of everyone who's living near the coastal areas because their lives are going to come under greater threat. Everybody from climate change in Pakistan, everywhere in the world, developing everyone proportionately. So we're looking at how do we build the resilience of areas by one is one is the rapid onset. So when we talk about coastal resilience, we have to look at the rapid onset, because when a cyclone happens, you have very little time for response unless you have already plans in place that you will initiate. Looking at it from the economic perspective, Sindh is the second largest economy in Pakistan after Punjab, and it contributes about 32% to the GDP. Fishery sector is also very well functioning in Pakistan, and as you can see, it has a contribution of about 650 million to the economy annually. So anything that disrupts the marine economy of coastal is going to have not just on the economy, but the subsectors of that economy that support the small villages and the people, local people who are dependent on this. Looking at it, because I had mentioned, the cycle of vulnerability, I will just give one example of the kind of losses that we suffered during the 2010 floods in Pakistan. So the economy suffered 18 billion in losses, and the people who were affected were 38.12 million. So that's huge for a country like Pakistan today. We have the constraint of sea level rise and the changing tidal rhythm. So we have to factor both of these and how it will affect the Indus Delta, because the Indus is a very important part of the economic line for these people. I did share this slide with you to highlight how cyclones have been increasing in recent years. If you see in earlier years, there was big gaps between cyclones taking place. Now the impact of climate change is accelerating. The amount of carbon that we have already trapped in the atmosphere is going to play itself out. Even if we become carbon neutral today, the amount of carbon that is already trapped there will play itself out. So we do know that we have to be prepared for more frequent and more intense storm surges, and the Hydromet department has been alerting us about the same. Contextualizing it back into the landscape of Sindh, because we are focusing on the coastal region of Sindh, it is the 7th largest delta. And there has been over the 50 years a systemic removal of the mangrove forests, which has increased the threats of tidal surges in this area. And this is something the government has done in recent years, which is quite commendable, and I will come back to that. But what happens as sea encroachment is that agricultural livelihoods of people, the rural community especially, come under extreme stress. There are two different issues on which I would like to focus now. One is how do we balance and how do we stabilize the process? So in balancing, what we need to do is restore the buffer zones. And this we can do by connecting the water and sediment pathways. Again, the Indus Delta becomes very important for us. And the role of the Delta is something that I think people downstream don't recognize enough. And that is something that needs to be highlighted. We also need to recharge the groundwater that is vital for sustaining the life, for the adequately controlling the soil salinity, because salinity is another factor that affects when there is too much sea encroachment. It affects the soil conditions, and that in turn affects agriculture, and that results subsequently in food security. And releasing enough fresh water through natural creeks and rivers so that we have rainwater reservoirs. So these are some of the balancing ingredients. Then we have, the buffer zone. We have to balance it with the planning. We have to balance it with other sectors so that you have a holistic approach through which you look at your own place-based setting, and then you know what are the ingredients, and then you move towards the stabilizing procedures. When we are building pathways to resilience, there are three main things that I have highlighted over here. We need to be very clear about our vulnerability, and we need to be very, very clear about the impact that it will have. So conducting impact assessment of the vulnerability and looking at vulnerability through the lens of human security, which ultimately will have an impact on our state security, because when the human security is weak, the state security gets compromised. So it is a larger than just a coastal area issue for us. Monitoring and early warning systems, these are very important. And the third and the last one is, what are the steps that we are going to take for mitigation and preparedness and response? When we say risk reduction, that actually means mitigation. When we say risk preparedness, what we mean is adaptation. And when we mean response, we mean, what are the preparatory steps that we have already put in place that we activate when an activity happens. So for these 8 steps are very important. We need data analysis. We need interventions to increase the capacity of the community. We need to maintain the coastal landforms and the physical coastal processes. We need to conserve nature. This is a very, very important factor. And I'll come back to this when I talk about the mangrove forests. Access to coastal resources, enhancing public access, management in planning, which means integration amongst the different relevant stakeholders, and knowledge sharing and community engagement. Now, I mentioned mangroves earlier also. I don't know if some of you are aware that the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has recently launched a report in which they've made a close connection between climate change and biodiversity loss, which means that if you improve one, the other will automatically improve. And if you degrade one, the other will also deteriorate. So this linkage has been highlighted. And for us, it is very important to remember when we build coastal resilience that the mangroves play a very important part, because as you can see, 0.6 million hectares is under the mangrove ecosystem. And we have in recent years increased that forest cover, which is something good, which is something that needs to be done. We are now one of the largest mangrove forest coastal areas in the world. And this is an effort that needs to be continued and sustained and maintained. In the strategy for resilience, it is a cycle of learning, actually. You prepare, a disaster happens. You, like I said, are never quite prepared for the exact extent and intensity of that disaster. You'd respond in your best possible capacity. Then you recover. And then you take the measures that you have learned from that disaster to feed into a new mitigation policy. And then again, that cycle goes on. So it's a learning graph that will continue. And we will have to keep modifying, because there is no such thing as a constant plan in risk reduction when the uncertainty of climate change is always there. So we have to look for sustainability. We have to look for hazard mitigation, and both of them together will feed into community resilience. And when you have community resilience, you have to plug in nature resilience with it, and together you will have a system that will work. In the last slide, I'm just going to talk about the framework that I recommend for action. It needs an enabling environment. This is something that cannot be done in silos by any department, agency, ministry. It requires integration. So policies, laws, agencies, literally a whole of society approach in which the hydromet services and research institutes will be playing a critical role, because the science generates the knowledge that helps policymakers to make informed policy decisions, and for the public to become aware of what are the threats and dangers that are looming ahead of them. Then we need to invest in infrastructure, preparedness, and delta health and marine ecology and the blue economy. This is a challenge because tendency becomes to invest in one sector more heavily at the cost of the other sector. And that is why I said the main challenge is that we do things in tandem with nature that help both to thrive. Human development needs are met, and at the same time, the rights of nature are protected. Controlling sea encroachment is very important, and we can do that through constructive land exposures to threats and vulnerabilities. And finally, we have the response, which is the monitoring and the responding and recovery cycle. So these are some of the activities that we need to do. Rest, I think, issues with regard to out-migration, with regard to livelihoods, with regard to urban infrastructure that will come under threat increasingly as more out-migration takes place. We can discuss that if that comes up in the course of our conversation. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to future collaborations with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for an enlightening presentation. It was truly, you truly enlightened us on the topic by highlighting the socio-economic cost of the damage the climate change is going to make, by bringing in perspective the damages we suffered in the floods of 2010. So with that, we will move to our second speaker, Dr. MUKHTIAR AHMED. Dr. Mahar is a PhD in Ecology and Fisheries from University of Sindh, Jamshoro. Currently, he is serving as a director at Center for Coastal and Deltic Studies, University of Sindh, Campus Thatta. He is a professor at Department of Freshwater Biology and Fisheries, University of Sindh. He received Best Researcher Award in 2018 from University of Sindh, and he received a gold medal in 2014 in recognition of his outstanding contribution to research. He has participated in and organized various conferences. He has authored more than 40 articles, and there are also 4 books to his credit. So with this brief introduction, over to you, Dr. Mahar. Dr. Mahar, are you with us? Can Mr. Mukesh tell us that is he here with us? Because I talked with him in the morning. Yes, he's here.
Yes, he's here. Yes.
Are you listening to me?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you very much. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I am really grateful to both the organizations who invited us here for a great discussion regarding the climate change and coastal issues in our area, especially in Pakistan, Balochistan, and Sindh provinces. So we know very well about the climate change. What is climate change, and what is the impacts of climate change on our coastal belt? And so here in this, we will inshallah discuss about some issues, their mitigations, measures, and the activities also we forwarded. Next, please. Next, please move. Madam, move the transparency.
Ahmad, please.
Okay, move.
Ahmad, another slide.
Okay, right. So in this slide, we can discuss about our coastal line. We know very well about our coastal line. Our coastal line is more productive and a good fisheries spawning ground for more than thousands of fish species. Our well productive and good natural resources depending upon the fisheries, mangroves, and livelihoods are mainly 350 kilometers in Sindh province. Indus Delta ecoregion is also nearest in our Thatta, Badin, and Sujawal districts, where we can find out the mangrove forestry, which is about 0.61 million hectares. And in current days, we are having 4 species of mangroves. Here we can see about the percentage of mangrove forestry. 30% of mangrove forestry is available at our coastal line. 40% fisheries are currently harvesting from our coastal areas. 20% agriculture systems are available. 5% other livelihoods, as well as 5 wildlife and other resources are available at our Sindh coastal zone. Here, already I think Madam has mentioned about the population of the coastal communities, which are about near 1 million. Sindh coastal estuarine area serve as good spawning and breeding ground for finfishes and shellfishes, which are having a good economical value. Sindh coastal zone is a very good zone, well product zone regarding the windmill energy, because of due to sea winds, they can provide the good area for the installation of windmills. Our coastal area mostly play important role in the GDP of Pakistan, which is about 5%, 0.5%, sorry. Next, please. Thank you. This is the situation analysis. We are discussing here about our resources which are currently available, as well as pictures of the past. What is the current and past status of freshwater, agriculture sector, fisheries sector, livestock, natural resources, mangrove forestry, socio-economics, pollution, over exploitation of natural resources as well. Sea intrusion is also the current issue in these days. So the literature and studies indicates the percentage rate which is mentioned in this slide is clearly indicating the current scenario of the coastal belt of Sindh province. Next, please. Next, ma'am. Thank you. So the agricultural, livestock and fisheries sectors are most important sectors at the coastal area of Sindh. So how they are currently affected by the climate change actions, by the pollutions and freshwater scarcity. The literature, newspapers, news are also indicating the current scenario of our zones. In this connection, we need the climate change adaptations, introduction of climate resistant plants and animals, terrestrial as well as aquatic forms, introduction of nutrients of agriculture, aquaculture and maricultures. If we not give the concentration on these sectors, then it may be possible that in near future, we can lose more and more species like the mangrove forestry, because mangrove forestry previously 8 species were available on this coastal area, but currently only 4 species are available. 2 species are under the process of conservation in higher quantity, while 2 major species are going to decrease in conditions. So we need the sufficient supply of fresh water, because we know very well about the availability of fresh water. Coastal zone areas, lives and livelihoods, both are needed the availability of the fresh water in the area. So the fresh water not only give the existence in the life, but the tiny creatures, the young ones of the fisheries sector, wildlife, as well as mangroves needs low saline water and low saline ecology, low saline atmospheric situations. So the natural resources are gradually suffering due to some ecological factors. We are know very well about which are the ecological factors which are needed to recycle and protect it in this connection. So in this connection, we need full care and conservation in this connection, as well as we should forward for the protection and conservations. In this connection, we need the collaboration and coordination of the community at first. We must take on board to our communities as well as research organizations, CBOs, NGO sectors definitely play important role in this connection. A number of NGOs are working here at Badin, Sujawal, Tatta, as well as Karachi coastal areas. They are working according to their capacities, but the government sector must need the attention. So government and states, when combine work together with the NGO sector as well as with the community, definitely we will reach the current issues and we might be salute and give the good solutions and recommendations. In this connection, mass migration and alterations are happening in the natural resources as well as in the population communities. Currently, the pollution status and overexploitation, both factors are major factors currently at the coastal areas of Sindh. Due to increase in human population, they are searching for food, they are capturing the natural fish stocks. Gradually, that stock is now demolishing and decreasing in the size. Karachi, Korangi areas wastes, windmills, wastes, and oil and gas companies powering the effluents at these areas. So also the domestic sewage of the Karachi and other urban areas, they are contaminating our natural resources. So it is the moral duty of all of us, not only the government, but all of us to give the strong attention on these measures. Next, please. Here we are seeing an empty table. This table indicates the lot of question marks regarding the sea intrusions, sea erosions, freshwater scarcity, and water flows in the Indus River, Kotri downstream side up to Khobar Creek area. What will happen, what we can do, we know very well about the current situation and past situations. So this is a quite long debate. So freshwater scarcity, sea intrusion, and erosions are serious issues which must be addressed scientifically, socio-economically, as well as politically with strong concentration and attentions. In this connection, the dialogues, cooperations, collaborations, and understandings are necessary among the federal government as well as among the provincial governments also. Next, please. This slide is clearly indicating about the coastal zone of the Sindh. Here we are seeing the sea intrusion and sea erosions. Here we have compared two maps of various years. One slide shows 1979 image and second slide indicating the current situation of 2015 image. Here the red line indicate that what is the status of seawater, how seawater is eroding the coastal zone. It is near about 2 kilometer change between 1979 and 2015. This is the satellite image which was also presented in the Scientific Studying Committee by Professor Dr. Sifraz Hussain Solanki Saab. So on the basis of these VNs and scientific proofs, now the scientific communities are agree that climate change is a real factor and it is gradually happening without any barricade and without any componental reasons. So we must be mitigate and take measures for the future planning. Next, please. Why all this is happening? Coastal area of Sindh, including Delta, was nourished with northern sediments. Definitely, our Indus River is bringing lot of sediments in the form of calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, silicates, nitrates, phosphates from the mountains, from the mountainous area, and that material is finally depositing in the sedimentation at the coastal zone of the Sindh. So in current days, due to fresh water scarcity and lowest flow in the Indus River, we are facing the problems. And this problem is happened due to the construction of barrages and dams, means man-made components. So through this seminar, I must recommend the attention of the government and the working sectors. Please come forward and give the attention on these issues, because this is a natural phenomena that and its sides are especially drawing as well as sinking. उर्दू में जैसे कहते हैं कि भाई पिछले वाला पोर्शन डूबे भी वही और सूखे भी वही, सिंधी में चदान आखिरी वाली पिछड़ी बुढ़े भी हैं सूखे भी. Next please. Finally, I am also grateful to all of you which given me this time to discuss some facts and figures regarding our coastal communities. My center, Center for Coastal and Delta Studies, is working for the current issues and regarding the solutions. And I'm also grateful to the NGO sector, government sector, public sector, private sector, as well as communities for giving us the chance and contributions to uh, contribute in this major issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Mukhtiar. It was really nice that we heard from you on various issues related to climate change. And thank you for highlighting the importance of collaboration in this particular issue that we all are facing these days. So with that, we'll move on to our third speaker, Dr. AMANULLAH MAHAR. Dr. AMANULLAH MAHAR is a PhD in environmental sciences from China. Currently, he is serving as assistant professor at Center for Environmental Science, University of Sindh, Jamshoro. He has authored around 26 publications, including 3 book chapters. He had been a part of various conferences and workshops. He was awarded as the Meritorious Teacher Researcher for the outstanding contribution in teaching and research in the field of environmental science by University of St. Jamshoro on 21st November 2019. So with this brief introduction, over to you, sir.
How can I play my presentation? I'm not the host right now.
You need to share your screen. We can already see your screen.
But I'm not sharing my screen. Is there someone else sharing my screen? Okay.
Do you want to share yourself?
There is an option over here of share screen. You can just click on that. Now we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Mariam, and I'm very grateful to the organizers of this online webinar. Indeed, it is a very hot topic nowadays in Pakistan when we talk about the climate change and its impact on various ecosystems. And coastal belt is one of the important areas where we can see and experience the impacts of the climate change. Earlier, 2 speakers, they have clearly highlighted that the climate change is a reality and it is hitting the coastal areas and the impacts are visible nowadays. So in that continuity, I will also share some of the important details and way forward. what we need to do now. Pakistan is already facing the climate change due to its arid climate, because we are situated in such climatic regions that nowadays we are facing the increase in surface temperature and the other associated climate change impacts. And due to lower technical and financial capability of Pakistan, we are facing hardship to adaptation and resilience in the climate change vulnerability. And you can see that this map is clearly shown as a lot of part of Pakistan is under the arid and semi-arid climate, and these such areas of large areas of Sindh and Balochistan both have a very dry areas, and they are experiencing high temperature during the summer season and very dry winter seasons. So these already we are facing the climate change due to our climatic. Uh, these two maps are different time scales. So one is two comparisons show the future predictability of increase in the surface temperature. You can see the red. You can see the red color is expanding across the map of Pakistan due to increase in surface temperature. Pakistan is not contributing significantly in the increase in the greenhouse gases, but Pakistan is one of the fifth country in the world which is witnessing the impacts of climate change. So we need to respond positively due to the changing in climate and conditions, especially in adaptation and resilience. And although we are contributing a little in the greenhouse gases emission, 40% from the fossil fuel and 40% from the agriculture, because our economy is based on the agriculture activities. Various reports have already highlighted that the unusual rain pattern, sea intrusion, glacial melting, and high temperature already reported in various parts of Pakistan. And a community is trying very hard to adapt these changes. I already shared with you that why Pakistan is more vulnerable to climate change. There is because because of its the arid and semi-arid climate, and we have diverse ecosystems, and different ecosystems have their capability to adapt the changing conditions. And in this presentation, specifically, we will highlight the issue of coastal areas. Over the years, Pakistan is government of Pakistan. In this current government, they have established a new Ministry of Climate Change, and we have now the policy, climate change, national climate change policy in 2012, and now provinces are also preparing their draft in fighting the climate change. Sindh government is also making their draft Sindh climate change policy. And in the connection to the combat climate change, Pakistan is trying their best to get the transfer technology from the developing countries, capacity building and support in promotion of the clean fuels and clean development mechanisms. First of all, when we talk about the impacts of climate change on the coastal areas, we need to understand the geography and landscape of the coastal area. For those participants who have not been there in the coastal areas, the Pakistan has a coastline of 900 kilometer, and 270 kilometer of that kilometer coastline lies in the Sindh province. The Sindh province coastline is ecologically very significant as compared to the coastline of the Balochistan. It might be due to the Indus Delta. And from the eastern side, we are bordering with India, and the western side, we border with the Iran. So the Sindh coast, further we can divide. When we talk about Sindh coast, we can further divide into the two, Indus Delta Creek system and Karachi coast. And Indus Delta uh, 1000 square miles, and is approximately the most prominent ecological feature of Sindh coast. The 85% of Sindh coast is covers the Indus Delta, and it features the tidal creeks and mud flats occupied by the you can see in the map as well. Already Ms. Aisha Khan has very gracefully pointed out about the important economical and ecological features of coastal belt. In this detail, we have no doubt about it. Coastline of Sindh province is important ecologically and economically. If we protect economical implications, then we have to think about the same for the ecological implications as well. We have the Indus Delta is also protected as declared as a marine protected area. We have sea turtle beaches, coastal marine islands, mangrove forest, and marine life, marine fisheries in seaports as well. This map shows the different creek systems of the Indus Delta. There are 7 major creeks, and a lot of coastal people are settling over the islands, and these creeks are very ecologically important. They support the mangrove forest. When we talk about the environmental issues of the Sindh coastal belt, various issues our Sindh when we look at the impacts of the environmental issues on the coast, Karachi coast, we have different problems like the untreated waste disposal and the solid waste garbage and etc. But when we look at the coastal areas of the Sindh coast, especially the area of Keti Bandar, the different creeks, Indus Delta, there is a very limited issue of pollution, but there are a lot of other issues: sea intrusion and the coastal erosion and climate change, etc. Of impact of climate change, coastal erosion, coastal pollution, and reduced environmental flow. Here I point out a very important issue that I've spent more than 2 years in the Indus Delta and worked closely with the people of Indus Delta. I've seen their lifestyle, their the problems, issues, and so the most of the local people, they are witnessing that they have not been impacted a lot by the climate change, rather than they are impacted a lot by the reduced environmental flows. Most of these the people in Sindh coastal area, they are opinion that if the government of Pakistan increase the environmental flows to the Indus Delta, their life will be will be changed a lot due to the supply of the fresh water. Then displacement of coastal communities due to the loss of livelihood, and their loss of land, etc. And socioeconomically underdeveloped. When you visit the coastal areas of Sindh province, you see the lot of poverty, lack of healthcare facilities, no education facilities, roads are not there, very underdeveloped area. And when we talk about that, the coastal areas are economically very important, then we must spend some money to develop these areas, and a lot of potential for the ecotourism. Mangroves are nowadays under the debate for degradation, shortage of the fresh water, shortage of the Indus river water, in camel grazing and cutting of the fuel wood. Climate change is widely recognized as challenging to humankind, and in the world has experienced the 0.12 to 0.026 last 59 years, and in Pakistan, 0.6 to 1%, 1 degree centigrade is also changed in the 19 especially in the coastal areas of Pakistan, and 10 to 15% decrease in precipitation in the coastal belt during last 50 years. And sea level. When we talk about the sea, when I interacted with the local communities, that do you know the climate change and the increase in surface temperature, they are well aware about the climate change, and they have also experienced the sea intrusion. They are giving the examples that Now the water level in our creeks and have changed, and we are seeing the level of seawater is increasing. And impacts of already some of the anthropogenic impacts or and some of the natural impacts where we have to wait for the natural blessing. Our coastal Sindh coastal areas are already prone to tropical cyclone storms and coastal flooding due to the low level of the coastal landscape that Ms. Aisha Khan has already shared with us. And the frequency and the intensity of the tropical cyclone have increased a lot. That is the alarming for us. And already the fragile ecosystem of Sindh coastal belt is unable to cope up the changing climate due to, on the one hand, on the one front, Sindh coastal areas are fighting for the reduced environmental flows and their impact associated after that. And on the other hand, climate change is also impacting a lot, changing in the sea level rise, sea intrusion, and changes of the hydrological regime, surface water, underground water, and the ocean acidification as sea salinity is also increasing in the creeks area due to the sorry yes. Now, when we, if we today, if we think about the protection of the Sindh coastal belt and we address the climate change and other factors, then we have to keep in mind there are some challenges. We need to address these challenges. First of all, if our government and other policymakers are sincere for the protection of the coastal belt, then have to think about to restore the minimum environmental flows at the downstream coastally to sustain the Indus Delta and the associated coastal communities and the marine life. Then if we do not have water, then surface and groundwater deterioration is already there, and it is increasing day by day. Every second and every minute is very important. A lot of fertile agriculture land of coastal areas have been degraded due to this sea intrusion. And decrease in downstream river flows 30 to 40% is already predicted during the next 50 years. On the one hand, we have diverted the waters to the other demands rather than providing to the ecosystem. But next 50 years, more water will be decreased due to the glacial retreats. And unfortunately, when experts talk about the degradation of the Sindh coastal belt due to the climate change, but we do not have a national consensus when we talk about to protect coastal belt. If there is a debate in National Assembly and Senate, very limited elected representative policymakers, they are of opinion that we need to protect Indus Delta. Some of the our decision makers, they think that Indus Delta, the coastal area, they are no more important. Water is more important. Ecosystems are not more important. This is very unfortunate for us. And recently, current government has launched that we will divert more water from the Indus Delta by making the Sindh barrage project to meet the demand of the drinking water supply. This is also a challenge for the coastal areas. Are They don't have the fresh water and the aquifers. And if we do not have the water supplies at the coastal area, then the mangroves will have the challenge to growth properly because they need a certain quantity of the fresh water. And nowadays the human population is expanding everywhere, and coastal areas are one of them also. And coastal areas have increase in the human population, and they are fully dependent on the coastal resources, and they are extracting the resources on an alarming rate that degraded a lot. you know Now, what we have, what opportunities we have, and what way forward we must devise today. First of all, we have made the national climate change policy. We are very sincere to for the climate change adaptation and resilience at every ecosystem, and coastal Indus Delta ecosystem is one of them. Then we have to strictly implement either if we want or not, we have to strictly implement climate change policy 2012, because if Sindh alone implement this Sindh climate change policy, but there are some sectors where Sindh provinces cannot do alone. For example, maintaining the environmental flows, and we must shut down the controversial project like the water diversion from the Indus River, like Sindh Barrage project, because we have to maintain the water flows as per Water Accord 1991. And another challenge we are facing, that the coastal communities which are displaced by the climate change and other anthropogenic factors, then so far we have not seen any resettlement plan by the government of Sindh to reallocate the displaced communities of the coastal areas. They have lost their source of income. They have lost their fertile agriculture. They have lost their land due to the different environmental issues. And we must allocate separate job and admission quota for these environmental catastrophe, and use of efficient water technologies in the agriculture sector, like drip irrigation. We use a lot of water in the irrigation system, like flood irrigation, a very old type of irrigation. We can save a lot of water if we implement gradually phase-wise drip irrigation in our uh, um, agriculture system. And more work is needed. Already work has been done, but we need to more work needed to build the capacity and knowledge of the coastal communities for the adaptation plans and disaster risk reduction strategies. We must applaud the work has been done by the WWF Pakistan and Sindh Forest Department. They are already doing a great work, and I was also part of these departments once upon a time. Pakistan Navy is addressing a lot of issues in our coastal areas, and IUCN is also in the leading. They are doing a lot. Still, WWF is in last 2 decades. They are doing their different projects addressing the climate change and other environmental issues over there. So we must acknowledge these department, and we should collaborate these department in this today's seminar. I haven't seen any participation from the Sindh Forest Department or the IUCN or WWF. They are the real stakeholders, and they are doing their job at their field. So coming to the conclusion, climate change is reality and affecting every part of the world, and Pakistan is one of them. And now most of our decision makers and our community, they are well aware and educated about the climate change. And most importantly, we need to step up efforts to switch from fossil fuels, and that is the biggest cause of climate change. On the one hand, we need to reduce the impacts of the climate change through the adaptation strategy. On the other hand, we have to switch to clean fuel as well. So thank you very much for being with us. And if you have any question and suggestion related to my presentation, and again, I'm very thankful for the Area Study Center, University of Sindh, and Institute of Regional Studies for inviting me as a speaker. And I'm always voluntarily available whenever you need my services for the benefit of the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aman, for your illuminating talk. It is very heartening to know that our academia is cognizant of all the challenges that we are facing vis-a-vis climate change. So before we go to the question answer session, I would like to know, I have one question I would like to ask you.
Excuse me, can you give me 1 second? My
Okay,
doorbell is ringing.
okay. I wanted to know, Dr. Aman, as you
जी जी
have pointed out to various challenges, and it's very heartening to know that you're cognizant of all those challenges. I want to know that in any way, were you able to communicate these challenges to the government of Sindh? Are they doing anything? Do they really take your opinion on these matters?
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm also on the expert list made by the Ministry of Environment, Government of Sindh. They have asked my services for the consultation of Sindh climate change policy on various intervals, and we as part and when we get together in various platforms like workshops, seminars, we interact with the ministers and the secretaries of the ministries and decision makers. They are of the opinion that we must protect the coastal areas, but they think that due to the shortage of the fresh water of the Indus River, the impacts have already worsening a lot. If I say that the 70 to 80% of the impact nowadays degradation is caused by the reduced environmental flows rather than climate change. People are more affected by the Indus Delta degradation. They are not getting proper water. If they get the water, life will be changed a lot, because this is not the story of 10 years. It has been more than 50 years that the water has been reduced over the period of time. And uh, now Sindh climate change policy is underway. Let's see that how Sindh government is tackling this issue. Now they have the separate policy.
Okay, thank you. I can see a raised hand from Mr. Imran Sardar. He's a research analyst at Institute of Regional Studies. So over to you, Imran.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for giving me the opportunity to ask question. Thank you very much, panelists, for a detailed overview of the subject. Before, I only knew about the glacier melting, flooding, but no idea how the climate change is impacting the coastal belt of Sindh. I appreciate firstly the IRS and the University of Sindh collaboration, and I hope this will continue in the future. Doctor, I have a couple of questions. Firstly, Dr. Amanullah has raised very important factor, that is environmental flows. As he said, people of coastal areas are more vulnerable to environmental flows rather than the direct impact of climate change. So, so I just wanted to know about the provincial and federal government realization of this issue. What currently is going on to address this environmental issue? Secondly, apart from that, whenever I participate in any climate change seminar or webinar, one question always strikes me. Then how can you move forward without realization of the gravity of this issue at the grassroots level? For me, the subject is of urban and educated class consumption. Common people are not familiar with the consequences of the climate change. Madam Aisha, I think, have highlighted in her presentation the importance of community engagement. So how the government, the civil society, and environment specialists can make this subject easy for public consumption, so that we can have massive response and from the public. So how can we do it? One way is that we can add this subject into the curriculum. So what other viable options do we have? So over to the panelist.
Uh, uh, Thank you, Mr. Imran Sardar Sahab. First of all, when I was in working with WWF Pakistan and I was in KT Bandar, a special committee sent by the in 2008, a special committee, standing committee from the Senate of Pakistan. The few elected members, they visited the Indus Delta to see the impacts and the issues of the coastal areas. They and the WWF Pakistan and other local stakeholders, they have briefed about, and they have taken to the creeks and mud coastal area. We have rightly pointed out the concern and of the coastal issues, and they have formulated the recommendation to government of Pakistan. But we have many laws and policies. Implementation is a great challenge in Pakistan. When you see the problem, and when we talk about the implementation, there are very challenges we have. One of the biggest challenges is that we don't have enough water to send to the Indus Delta. We are already have issues in here. And second one is the WWF Pakistan and IUCN. They are working closely with the local communities, and they have organized the community structure of the coastal area, and they have educated communities in especially in climate change. The local people, especially their young adults and elder people, they are well aware about the climate change, global climate change, and their role, and they are rightly participating in the natural resources management through mangrove plantation, and they are educating their children. But they of the opinion that we must address their issues: loss of livelihood, loss of agricultural land, and they need the resettlement plan. And they said, every time you came here and discuss the climate change, educate us, but you are not addressing our issues we are fighting nowadays, especially the loss of livelihood. That's why they are leaving their ancestral places to other places for search of livelihood.
Thank you, Dr. Mahar. Someone else wants to respond to the question of Mr. Imran?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that by
Please.
saying that, we've talked about the reduced environmental flows. But, if you look at the total flows that are coming into the river Indus, they have remained the same from 1950 to today. The same 138. For a while it was 145 till we had the waters of the eastern river in Ravi coming in, but now it's 138 million acre feet. That has remained the same. The problem is not in the availability, it is a widening gap between demand and supply. Because of the increase in our population, now the demand has outstripped supply. So that is what is creating the imbalance. And subsequently, this will worsen because as the hydrological balance changes due to the planetary regime in the climate and its impact, we will see accelerated flows, and then we will see reduced flows. So all that is going to have an impact on the total amount of water that is available to go and address the needs of people and also meet the environmental needs. The second question was about acceptance or effective communication between community and policymakers. Now, while a lot of organizations do awareness raising campaigns and engage in advocacy, the point that is missing is that at the inception level, when the policy is being made, it is not co-created. That is where you need to bring in the community or create community stewardship, and you have to reflect their hopes and aspirations. They need to be part and parcel of that policy. So when you co-create policy and the community has a ownership stake in it, it will share the responsibility. And that is a missing link. So the policy may look very good on paper, but it will not have a buy-in from the communities because it is not truly reflecting their priorities in life. So if we start moving towards co-creating policies, we will have a better enabling environment. And that is why I said that, within silos, policies don't work. Climate change, coastal area resilience, adaptation. There's so many sectors, so many departments, so many actors that are involved. If all of them are not engaged in it and we don't take this whole of society approach, we're not going to see good results.
Thank you, ma'am. I could see another hand raised from Mr. Amir. So do you want to ask a question? Over to you, Amir Khan. Amir Khan, are you there? You have a hand raise option. Okay, he has also written his question. I would read from here. What is the United Nations doing to combat climate change? He wants to know the role of United Nations. Anyone who would like to respond?
I can respond to that. Yes, you know, the UNFCCC, which is the Framework Convention for Climate Change, the first meeting that took place where this whole idea was conceptualized was in the Earth Summit in 1992. And since then, under the UN framework, conversations between parties and countries have been taking place. And the landmark Paris Agreement on Climate Change was signed in 2015, which brought together 196 countries to agree on an agenda of solutions. After that, there have been certain meetings to decide who will do what, when, how, you know, the nuts and bolts of operationalizing that agreement and fleshing it out. And now at the Conference of Parties that will take place in Glasgow, hopefully in November, I think with the United States back in the policy as a partner, we are hoping that the IPCC report that requires that we reduce emissions down to 1.5 degree threshold, because anything beyond that will have catastrophic results. So the world community is making commitments through their nationally determined contributions and commitments, but it all remains uncertain because these commitments are not legally binding. So what we hope is that between science and governments and societies all becoming now acutely aware of the impact of climate change and realizing that we either sail or sink together in this, people will cooperate and come to some solution that prevents us from complete catastrophe.
Thank you very much. There is another question by Muhammad Isa. Can proposed Sindh barrage of WAPTA reduce climate change impacts on coastal belt? I can see that Mr. MUKHTIAR Ahmed has given some response to this question. So anyone else, or maybe Mr. MUKHTIAR, if you want to add to it?
Yes, ma'am. Sindh barrage is basically, it is a question mark still, because we have no sufficient supply of water in the Koti downstream. Therefore, how we can recommend the construction of Sindh barrage? Although it is a good project, definitely, but we are already facing the problems of man-made structures. As previously discussed in my last slide, now Sindh barrage is a best proposal of the WAPDA. But currently, what is the situation of Kotli downstream's freshwater flow? We must be manage the proper supply of water, at least according to the accord of the 1991. Then we will be suggest further projects as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Aman, would you like to add to it?
Yes, already, you know, our federal government is simply unaware of the impacts of climate change and reduced environmental flows, especially in coastal area. If they are aware, then they would have not designed the Sindh barrage project, because you know, we are already fighting for the scarcity of water downstream Kotri, and now you are planning to divert more water from the Indus Delta. That will be the last nail in the coffin of Indus Delta. Then we will study Indus Delta, and only in the textbook and then in the museum we will see the models of Indus Delta. nowadays a lot of work is only doing the non-government organizations in adaptation and resilience building of the communities. You will not see the role of government over there, either the district government or the provincial government or the federal government. Only the uh, um, uh, development sectors is working over there, and they are trying very hard to build their capacities. And if our government, federal government, is sincere, then they must maintain, as Ms. Aisha Khan rightly pointed out, that there is not a problem of the availability of water, only the management of the water. And we must set the priorities that where we have to use the water, either in the flood irrigation, where we use the 90% of the our surface water. The world has discarded this concept of irrigation. We are not using efficient water technology. We can save a lot of water there. We can use this water in the towards our demanding areas. And Sindh Forest Department nowadays they are working very hard, especially in the Karachi coastal area, the KT Bandar, Indus Delta. Their efforts are very commendable nowadays.
Thank you, Dr. Aman. I can see a raise hand from Dr. M. Yunus. So over to you, sir. You're not audible, sir. You have to unmute.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm thankful to you, especially Madam, for your permission and ask something. First of all, I congratulate the whole team for such a nice hot topic today about the environment and climate change. No doubt that it's a great effect throughout the world and has impact on the livelihood as well as the human being. I am not an environment scientist, but being a researcher, fisheries researcher, I'm working at Indus downstream for last 4 years. So as the speakers told, many problems and issues, and some of the audience also asked what is the policy our government have take the initiative to control all our this. So I would like to share some of my observations according to the fisheries research. So in my point of view, the major effect is everyone told that is the flow of water. Because no doubt, whenever there is no flow of water, definitely it is affecting the delta region and downstream, and as well as the biota and fauna of the downstream. Now, the thing is that how we should maintain and manage these things. Major issue is for this area is the silting. For many years, I think I haven't, when I went through this literature, I could not found that how long ago it was excavated, because many countries, even I witnessed in, especially in China, they were desilting their rivers. Even huge Yangtze River is the huge river. Dr. Manmar might have an environment scientist and might have visited that, and everyone know that is the technology. So we must adapt the technology. So due to the silt that had reduced the space, water capacity, we are not only the blaming the things that these are the major issues, but the resolution. So we must have a proper desiltation of the river. And secondly, as speakers told, that flow of water is very short as we require, and there is the shortage. As all of the people are the expert, that climate change only not have effect on the sea, but also on the ice melting is another issue. So due to the ice melt, there is the huge flow of water and rivers. We are witness when 2009, 10, 11, 12, there was huge flood in Pakistan, and we wasted a lot of our water into the sea without getting any advantage. Unfortunately, we manage the rivers only just for the agriculture purpose. So if we desilt it, we increase the capacity and manage this system. If someone, every after 4 years, 5 years, there is the heavy flood. If we have the capacity in the river Indus, then that heavy capacity we can manage from these barrages. Barrages also have, no doubt, have some disadvantage, but very useful. We can start, they make dam, we can utilize the agriculture first, we can use for this as in fisheries sector as well as. So I would like this forum that come to forward and make this policy. And based on today the discussion of the speakers and the experts, Dr. Aisha Khan as well as, so make the policy and write to the government that must have a manage these things. So thanks to all of you. These were some my observations and suggestions. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Yunus. It was basically a comment rather than a question. There are two more questions in this chat box. One is from Miss Nazia Bano. She wants to know that as Sindh is the most affected region, so what three main and urgent measures can be taken to combat and minimize the climate change? So who would like to respond to it? Ma'am Aisha, would you like to respond to it?
I can make a response, but I'm sure, you know, the two colleagues, experts from Sindh will be able to add on to it. I think that, you know, we, like I said in my framework of action, that we need an enabling environment. We need to create that enabling environment, first of all, where all the stakeholders come together to make policy. Then we need investments. We need investments in technology. We need investments in human resource, and we need to have research, because without credible scientific research, the issues, as you saw that we're discussing earlier as well about the environmental flows, the cost effect of that, because governments, you know, take two types of attitudes. They have their political time horizons. So they're looking at it from a temporal lens, and they're looking at it from a spatial lens. So the temporal investments don't necessarily always take into account needs that are aligned with human development and nature-based solutions, because those are long-term investments that you're making. So we have to have this distinction and understand, you know, the compulsions of governments who are managing these policies. And the last is, of course, finance. We don't have the necessary financial resources for risk reduction measures. So we need to be very clear on the policy that we make, because the policy should be broad-based, it should be representative, it should be inclusive, and it should be seen through the human security lens with focus on gender needs as well, because that is something that, you know, gets diluted in our policies. And then the other things that I shared with you. I'll leave our other experts to add on to that.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Very nice discussion. Actually, in current days, we are going to introduce the climate change resilient and adaptability. So must we introduce the new trends of aquaculture, new trends of agriculture for climate change combating. Well, we try to introduce some new species as well. But before going to introduce new species, first of all, we must take the research measures for their adaptability and resistancy. Either they are harmful or useful for the native species. So first step is the introduction of new species in this area. Second, we try to develop the adaptable native species. So therefore, here is the need of a lot of research. We must take the initiatives for research to adaptation, the biodiversity mechanisms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you,
And
Dr. Aman.
yes. And now government of Pakistan is getting a lot of funds internationally to fight the climate change, especially climate financing. And in climate financing, the funds should be utilized judicially across Pakistan where the impacts of climate change are visible, especially coastal belt, you know. And then there is a lot of potential of the biosaline agriculture in coastal areas where salinity is increasing. normal agriculture cannot be done there, then biosaline potential is very much high. And now the biosaline successful demonstration has been done in Tharparkar region, where they are using the underground water, and that models can be replicated. And Pakistan Agriculture Council can do a lot of projects in the Sindh coastal area, so they have to take some initiatives. And other one is that when we talk about the protection of the coastal belt, then we must address the issues of the people, because they are highly underdeveloped. They don't have other than fisheries, they don't have alternate source of income. And if we address the effects of the people, then the impacts will be also to some extent the effects will be minimized. And the federal government has to make a consensus for the judicial use of the surface water, rather than injudicious use in the agriculture.
Thank you. I can see another question by Mr. Imran. Uh, so over to you, Imran. And this is the last question of the session.
Thank you very much, Mariam, for giving me again the opportunity to ask the questions. So since the subject is very interesting, I have a lot of questions in my mind, but due to time constraint, we have to wind it up. So the replacement of people from the vulnerable areas is a difficult job, as one of the panelists has highlighted this. Since we don't have a comprehensive early warning system, people do migrate on its own. I know Pakistan is a developing country having limited resources. So within the limited resources, how best we can do to address the sufferings of the people? Any panelist can respond to this question.
Can I answer?
Yes, sure.
Mr. Imran Sahab, whenever local people get the early warning system, early warning for any the natural catastrophe predicted by the meteorological department, they only get the warning. They don't have any other strategy. Government advise the local to evacuate the land and go somewhere else on their own expenses. They don't have, when you give the warning to the affectees, you must have the other option as well, because limited people are migrating from the coastal areas. If you accommodate gracefully, give them the alternate source of income and accommodation and other things, so things will be settled a lot. Only warning is not enough. You must have the other resettlement for the part-time resettlement. People of the coastal area, they don't want to leave their ancestral place. This is the forced migration, and government must seriously respond to it, not only giving them the only warning only.
Thank you, Dr. Aman. Dr. Mukhtiar, would you like to respond to it?
Yes, ma'am. This is basically the responsibility of the government as well as the district governments to take the initiatives for early responding system. Few days ago, some issues were raised regarding the cyclones. So now currently the technology communication system is very rapid. So it is the moral duty of the local
So you have to unmute yourself.
and district government must take initiative to communicate the perception.
Thank you, Dr. Mukhtiar. Ma'am, would you like to respond to this question again?
Yes, I think it's a very pertinent and it's a very important question, because, the early warning is a warning, but what do the people do? How have you made the preparations for them to be able to respond to it? So I think, first of all, we need closer communication, coordination between the PDMA and between the Hydromet department, so that the early warning and the disaster management authorities are aligned. And then at the district level, and then down to the tehsil and community level, we must have the CBDRMs, the community-based disaster management plans, so that the communities know, in the event of a disaster, what are they supposed to do? How are they supposed to respond? Where are they supposed to go? Without these supporting mechanisms, just an early warning system in itself will just create panic in the community. And maybe, they'll start fleeing, but that's about it. And that's not really what we call effective disaster risk management or a risk strategy. So that I'm sure they're working on it, because it's happening elsewhere. Everywhere when they have a disaster management strategy, it is followed by a CBDRM at the community level.
Thank you, ma'am. You're very right that in all sections of society, we really need to have information regarding these challenges. With that, I would like to thank all the honorable speakers, especially from University of Sindh, for gracing us with their presence. We look forward to more collaboration with University of Sindh in future. Thank you. Thank you, participants, for your valuable questions. And thank you, Ma'am AISHA, for your eloquent and enlightening presentation. With that, we'll sign out. We hope to see you in our other webinars as well. Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.